Hello, America. Today's show topic is how it seems the left is winning even when they lose. And to help discuss how this is, we'll be joined shortly by our awesome, incredible friend, Army John. If time permits, we've also got an incredible profiles in history. This guy is really, really cool. I had a lot of fun looking this guy up. So sit back, buckle up, and hang on because, yes, we're just getting started.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. You and I have a rendezvous with destiny.
You know what time it is, so sit back and get ready for the Stafford Voice, your dose of conservative in a world of liberal.
3, 2, 1.
Hey, how you doing? I'm your host, Daniel Stafford, and you are listening to the Stafford Voice, where we are conservative in a world of liberal. And tonight, I've already told you what we're going to talk about. This big question. How it seems the left is winning even when they lose. And to help us discuss that, we'll be joined shortly by our friend and yours himself, the Army John. Most of you guys know him over on the Twitterverse, at Army John. But listen, I want to remind you that there are many, many ways to listen, so set this channel as a favorite wherever you are, whatever you have to do, so you don't get left behind. Because if for some strange, crazy reason you do miss this show, you'll be able to catch the replay. So just sit tight. There is no need to panic because, hey, I've got you. In the case you aren't already following on social media, you can find me over on the Twitters or the Gab at Stafford Voice, or on Grassfire, Facebook, Instagram. Look, whatever your social site is of your choosing, wherever you're at, just search for the Stafford Voice, and yes, we're probably there. Speaking of which, you need to do yourself and everybody else a favor. Go over to thestaffordvoice.com. Either at the top of the page or the bottom right-hand side. If you scroll down far enough, you're going to see a little window. Sign up for our monthly newsletter. We're trying to give away something really, really cool to get the summer into the spirit, to get you in the spirit of summer. I've got this nice little package that I'm ready to give away, but the only way you can follow along with things as far as the giveaway is you have to be a subscriber. That's the only way you get the information on how to win. Okay, enough about all of that stuff. Let's get into this, shall we? Let me invite my my friend over onto the show. Let me bring him in because he hit me up with this question and tagged this article to me. Oh man, it's probably been what, 2 weeks, John?
Yeah, about 2 weeks.
Okay. Well, so it's been about 2 weeks, and you tagged me in this article, and it really, really caught my attention. And it is, here's why Democrats get their way so often. And it really got me thinking how it seems that the left is winning even when they lose. And this is our topic for tonight. I think there are so many different things we can talk about. But I'm going to turn time over to you. I want you to, for those of you listening or watching out there, I want you guys to know how you can find at Army John. So give us a brief introduction of who you are, how they can find you on social media.
Hey, good evening, Daniel. It's good to be on your show and spend time with your audience. This is a fantastic show. I am at Army John, that's Jon on the Twitterverse. I do have a Facebook page, but I save that pretty much for family and very close friends and people who aren't political. So anyway, with that, I'm a 6-year Army veteran, still active in the National Guard, and that's one of our common connections between you and I. And I just appreciate the show that you've done. I'm a big supporter. But before we get into the topic, I just want to take a second and recognize your contributions, Daniel, your courage, your bravery, and your refusing to quit and give up even when the going gets tough. You've been on this radio show now, gosh, since I think I started listening to you back in 2014. So we're at least driving on 3 years since I've known you, and was the whole Politainment group. And so, you know what? We're just really proud that life issues happen. You can only give so much time out of your personal life to do something that doesn't pay you back. So I get that, but you've gone the extra mile, brother, and I just appreciate everything you do for conservatives who really don't have a voice anymore in very few outlets these days.
Well, it may seem like we don't have a voice or outlet anymore, but we really do. I think there's enough of a groundswell there that we're seeing some things happen. I know I see some things on my end that are really, really exciting. A couple of weeks ago we had J.D. Rucker on from the Federalist Party. That's really exciting. I mean, conservatives really, that's something that I think conservatives and even some right-leaning Democrats could really adhere to and kind of take the ball and run. And here in the next upcoming few weeks, we're going to have somebody else from the Federalist Party on. Really excited to get him on and talk about what he's doing at the state level. We talked to JD and kind of got an umbrella idea of what the Federalist Party is, but we're going to bring somebody on and we're going to talk about exactly what he's doing in his state, how he's helping form that state's party, if you will, for the Federalist Party. So that's really exciting. I know that he's already got some things in the works, but nonetheless, really, really excited to see what he comes out with. I'm really keeping my eye on the Federalist Party. I don't know quite the reason why I feel so drawn to it. I think maybe it's one of those what is it called, originalist ideas, and I think we'll kind of talk about that here in just a bit. But I really appreciate your kind words. You've pretty much been there since day one with us, not only with Politainment, but with the show as well. So I really appreciate that, and I know that you're willing to jump on board to come on the show a couple of times now, and then I think we're getting ready to see some content come out from you on the Stafford Voice. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I'm very excited to get my feet back into the mix. Yeah, as you know, we had a site a while back, but for whatever reason, that's no longer around. But I'm glad to be able to contribute and put my 2 cents in. If we speak together and we all contribute, I think that we'll start to have an impact on the generation that's coming up. Because the only thing we have to do is stay silent and give up, and evil is allowed to do whatever it wants. So I'm glad to be part of Team Stafford. So anyway,
so let's dive into this. Democrats
Absolutely.
seem to get their way so often. How is it so? I'm interested to see how you want to tackle this idea.
Sure, a couple of different things. Wouldn't you love to lose and win? If you're the Seattle Seahawks, at least when I was growing up in Pacific Northwest, we used to cheer the opposing team. Didn't matter who they were. But could you imagine being 21 points under and then lose to the Denver Broncos and then turn around and get the Super Bowl ring? Well, this doesn't work anywhere else except in politics. So, I was drawn to this article that I sent over to you, and it was from WorldNet Daily, and the bottom line is, Democrats seem to win, or liberals seem to win, even when they lose elections. As you have been tracking since 2016, Democrat Party and liberals in general have been losing election after election, state by state, and yet they managed to turn that around into, a force which is still difficult to deal with. It's like when Trump said, we're going to drain the swamp. Well, I think the swamp keeps winning, and the more that we drain it, at least that's what it looks like. But what drew me to this article was its directness and its bluntness. Yes, they are able to get things done, even though they've lost power in Congress. They've lost even a lot of state legislatures and governorships. But one of the things that we need to be aware of as citizens and voters is it's not just sending people to Congress. I voted for my congressman. I'm now going to go back, put my head down and work and raise my family and do all the things that all of us do as adults, and then let the Congress folks fight it out in Congress, assuming that they'll look out for your interest, my interest, and everyone else's. Well, that's kind of lazy citizenship. So one of the things that this article brought out was the fact that the judicial branch has really been sort of partly a dumping ground. So members of Congress can do unpopular things, and do things that are unpopular with the people, but then still keep their jobs. So that's one thing that Congress has neglected their duty and delegated it to unelected officials, in this case, federal circuit court judges, Supreme Court judges, and things like that. The other thing, too, is the Supreme Court in and of itself has, or the judicial branch in and of itself has taken power that's not enumerated in the Constitution. So there's kind of a mix going on here. And a lot of it, you look at, well, what is all this unifying, driving? How do so many people work so unified in doing something that's pretty clearly not according to the founding fathers' principles of our country? I mean, the court literally is the last stop when you have an out-of-control Congress or an out-of-control presidency, executive branch. The courts have always been, okay, these guys are out of control, we'll sue them. The courts will, review the Constitution, take either the legislation that was poorly crafted, like Obamacare, or maybe executive actions that don't seem to be consistent with the Constitution, and the courts can slap it down. We have many examples from the Clinton administration, even some of the legislation, some of the executive actions that Bush took were challenged in court. But now we're kind of seeing this, I want to say, extra court input, specifically the travel ban. If you looked at what Trump passed, his first act in office was a travel restriction on 7 Middle East countries. That was immediately challenged in court, and a federal circuit court judge in the Pacific Northwest, Seattle, had basically said, no, we're putting a stay on this executive order. You can't do this. And the interesting thing with that decision was it was cited from material used on his campaign trail, as opposed to, well, is the executive order legal or is it illegal? You can't say all Christians are banned from entering the country. Well, that's discriminating against a religion. But you can say people from these geographical locations are considered a threat. So yeah, we can ban these. What's interesting that Obama actually had a travel stay against 9 countries from that same region.
And each one of the ones that Trump listed were also on Obama's list as well.
The same list. So Trump was really handed. Trump didn't sit down in his office one day, well, how can I piss off the world, or how can I take revenge against certain countries? No, he didn't do that. He was handed by an administrative official or a secretary of the Department of State said, Mr. President, we suggest that you sign this travel restriction based on our findings and the intelligence offices. These countries seem to be a threat to us. And this is not something new. We did this, 5 or 6 years ago with the prior president. So everything aside, what are we left with? So clearly a travel restriction is within the purview of the executive branch and the president. It's been done before. It's not like it's never been done before. So we mill out all these impurities. What are we left with? Well, we're left with a sort of a value system. If you're not judging on the law, what are you evaluating on? Well, you're evaluating to the values of the country, the community, and that's, I think, what we're coming down to. It's liberal progressivism and an opportunity to be obstructive to the executive orders in a way that's maybe not legal. For example, a judge cannot be also a witness. It's a very important thing. A judge is impartial and evaluates the testimony provided by experts. And when these cases went through even the Ninth Circuit Court, the stay was the ban on the ban was upheld, or the court's stay on the executive order was upheld, but it was not done for any particular legal reason. There was no violation of the law, a statute, the Constitution, and so what's left with it was a violation of conscience. And I don't think that's part of our judicial system, and that's not enumerated in the Constitution. Something might be wrong, but it doesn't make it illegal, and vice versa. We look at this growing cultural inclusion, sort of like a amicus brief, or for your listeners, that would be a friend of the court. Somebody's providing expert testimony to a decision that's being made, even though they're not directly involved with the case. There is legal provisions for outside influence into a decision, but not the judge himself. So I think, what are we creating here? What do we have when we have a absolutely legal order, And you know what a legal order is from spending, I believe you were in the Army for what, 4 years or 5?
Just 3
You
years.
understand?
Right.
Just 3 years, thank you. So you understand what a legal order is, and you also understand what an illegal order is. Every soldier gets that training. You cannot be ordered to shoot innocent unarmed victims by your commanding officer. In fact, that was a very famous case in Vietnam, the My Lai massacre.
Right.
So we have these rules. We have these very well-defined parameters in which we can operate, but we see the results that our courts and to an effect our legislators and congressmen are not operating within those parameters. So what do we do? What do we have? A runaway court. We have judges making stands based on a particular set of political opinions and not legal. And where is the checks and balances then on a judicial system that, quite frankly, is out of control? Well, that would be Congress. The president cannot remove these judges. They are appointed for life, and there's a reason why. They don't want to be influenced or threatened, or if you don't judge the way we or have an outcome on a case that we like, we're not going to renew your judgeship. Well, that doesn't happen. These judges are appointed for life. So then what do we have? What is our recourse? Is the courts, or is Congress. And so are we electing people who are looking at this ginormous problem? And the president, Trump, has been president for exactly 136 days. And in that short amount of time, how many of his executive orders have been overruled, have a judicial stay put in place on an order? Quite a few, far more in 136 days than President Obama had in 8 years. That's pretty amazing when you really look at this resistance that's not legal. I mean, if the president was issuing illegal executive orders, you would expect that. But these are not illegal or executive orders that violate a statute, violate a law.
Well, and that really points to something that I think it was David Horowitz, that
yes.
Where did he? Okay, so
he had several.
Yeah, he had several points in it. We're gonna get into. Slick's kind of giving us a hard time. He says I need to smile or something. I'm just intently listening and I'm trying to collect my thoughts. Slick, sorry. I see you guys over in the chat there, and one of the things that they did bring up was the last means of defense against a corrupt court is obviously we the people. I think we all know that. But Horowitz said, I mean, they could require 2 members of each family in order to foster diversity to get sex change operations. Literally, the Republicans will get up there and say, while I strongly agree, it's the law of the land. Everything the courts do is the law of the land, even though the law of the land is not the law of the land. That really touches on what I think we've seen over the last, I mean, you want to really say 8 years, but we have to be a little more broad than that. And this is something that has been a slow progression over at least 16 to 20 years, where we've seen a continuation of putting politically motivated judges in place, and they stay there for life. And if you want to debate that, go read the Constitution. For anybody out there that wants to debate it, I mean, you got the whole what is it, the good behavior clause? Well, if you're an originalist, do you know that the good behavior clause was originally debated as saying for life? I mean, it's very, very hard and difficult to argue that a judge is quote unquote without or within good behavior, that they're going against that. But that's something that Republicans, for some reason, tend to be a little too nice. And I think Ted Cruz kind of touched on that during the election, that conservatives and Republicans both, they need to lighten up, quit being such a stick in the mud. They have to be comedic. They have to be. It's okay to be funny, but it's okay to challenge somebody, regardless of the fact if somebody wants to start immediately name calling you, or degrading you, or saying that you're an anti-Trumper, this or that. Throw all of that stuff out the window. I mean, we have a nation to protect. We have this entire idea of America that we need to protect and continually defend. I mean, I know you as well as I did when we raised our right hand and promised to swear and uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. It didn't end after our time was done. If anything, now that we've seen the country and experienced it in an entirely different way, we have an entirely different love for our country and what it means to be an American. Now is not the time to lay down our arms. I mean, I want to go back to something that Horowitz touched on, where
absolutely.
He was talking about how these judges, and I want to get into. I've got something else that I think just came out over the weekend from. It was either Heritage or Daily Signal, one of the two, but where he was talking about how these district judges in various locations of the U.S. These U.S. district judges are basically subverting what we're trying to do to protect the country and the constituents thereof. And he said three of those four judges owe their lifetime appointments to Barack Obama. This is part of what Horowitz calls, quote-unquote, social transformation without representation. The phenomenon of unelected judges issuing nationwide rulings on foundational issues such as immigration that the framers of the U.S. Constitution meant to be decided by the elected branches of government. And again, that goes back to Article 3 of the Constitution, where we're laying out the powers and stuff that Congress have. They've been given these powers and granted them by us. I mean, we're the ones that elect them and send them there to do these things. But when we don't hold these people accountable, we're now reaping the benefits of sitting back and watching football on a Monday night instead of trying to debate these issues and figure out where in the hell did we go wrong and how can we fix it.
Well, you just asked an excellent question, Daniel. What went wrong and how do we fix it? I think an important thing for your listeners to note: when the Constitution was created, we have three areas of law, but then we grew a fourth. The three areas of law that we have is administrative law, then we have criminal law, and you have civil law. And those are identified in the Constitution of types of laws that we create. For example, the IRS is regulated by administrative law, and as we saw with the issues of Lois Lerner, she violated some administrative laws. Some of them may even go into criminal law, as we saw with our favorite Congressman Trey Gowdy, as he grilled them on Congress. But here's what's interesting is the fourth area of law is case law. And that's a really interesting one because that's where you start recording decisions on challenges to either laws or situations where a plaintiff, Brown versus the Board of Education. And this is how one judge in one district can prevent legislation or block legislation for the entire nation because they're waiting on that case law to be formed. And I think it's important to understand how this happens. So with case law, we can stop executive orders. This is how this judge in Seattle was able to do this. And the administration, to avoid violating administrative law, they have to wait for the decision to be finalized on the case law. So this is how we kind of got stuck in this situation. As you know, when laws are interpreted by judges or the Supreme Court, that becomes a law in and of itself. For example, Roe versus Wade, one of the most controversial Supreme Court decisions on the interpretation of the Constitution, that a new definition came out of that ruling. In fact, that goes even farther beyond that. Another famous case is the came out of the Scopes monkey trials in the 1950s, where the Supreme Court under Justice Warren had said that freedom, the separation of church and state, the very famous thing that we live with today, wasn't really written into the Constitution. It was an obscure letter that Benjamin Franklin, I believe, wrote to some Southern Baptists in the South about there still being it was Thomas Jefferson, thank you, had wrote this letter. Well, the Supreme Court completely ignored the context behind the Federalist Papers and took this obscure letter and say, oh, here's the definition we're going to use to can the state establish a religion? We're talking states, not the federal government. Or can the state support a religion? Well, there shall be an inseparable wall between the church and the state. Those were words taken out of an obscure letter, not the Federalist Papers, not the Constitution. So what ends up happening is you have this creeping change of definitions. You change the language to get the results that you want. And so that's how we got here. So the next question is, how do we stop this? And that's another important one. Well, let me ask you this, Daniel. If I gave you a $20 bill, how would you tell that it's a counterfeit or real? What would you look for? Obviously, I wouldn't be able to tell.
I would look for quite a few things. Obviously, you check for the watermark. You check for the red and the blue fibers that's in the cloth. You check for the ink. You can hold it up to a black light. I mean, there's a whole laundry list of things you can do. I mean, that goes into my geek days of collecting coins and paper. So,
good to know that. But here's the point: the federal is it the I forget which department this is. The Department of Treasury doesn't train their agents on every possible counterfeit. I mean, there's millions of them out there. What they do with their agents, and this is a real important point, is they train every agent on the real deal. They memorize every line, every curve in the print, the watermarks, where they are at. So when you come across a counterfeit, it just stands out like a sore thumb. And the reason why I mentioned that analogy is that, do we really know our Constitution as citizens? Do we, I'll be honest with you, the last civics class I had was in college in 1990. That's quite a long time ago. So now, do I kind of keep up with things here and there? Absolutely. But do I go through that intense training? A lot of knowledge is perishable. I mean, you went through that in your time in the Army. You forget things. That's why we have annual training or commanders directed training, because we forget these things. So are we reading, doing our part as citizens to study the Constitution? Do we have a copy of it in our house? Do you look at it every now and again? Do you keep up with any journals in judicial law? I mean, yeah, you can geek out and really get into all of that if you're a lawyer. But for those of us, knowing the basics and the foundation, when something comes across, like, here's a perfect example. Nancy Pelosi said during the Affordable Care Act, we have to pass it to find out what's in it. If that just didn't strike a knife into the soul of your being and saying that's not how Congress works, that's not how a bicameral legislation works. You debate the law. Is it what's in the best interest of the country? And what surprises me is not what happened in a banana republic style with Affordable Care Act. It's that the lack of outcry is what shocked me. That people didn't stand up and say, what in the devil is that? How do you pass something to find out what's in it? It makes absolutely no sense. But that's where we're at, because people don't know. We don't know that we're being fooled. We don't know that we're being tricked. And I think that's the hardest thing. So how do we change that? Well, we educate ourselves. But the big things, we had to educate our children. And I think that I can say one thing, Daniel. I would say we're kind of in bad times. I mean, we've been in worse times as a country, but one thing that bad times do is they create good people. They create good citizens. And I think the Democrats might be getting, the liberals, progressives, might be getting a short-term victory, but look at what they're creating. When I see churches full of, teenagers and young 20-year-olds, hey, when I was 20 years old, I didn't go to church. But I go to church now, and I just see all these young people. It's like, you know what? The drug, sex, and rock and roll isn't paying off. It's not delivering us on our dreams. And I think I call it the counter culture. Little reference there for those of you who were flower children in the 60s, the counterculture. Well, we're seeing the reaction to that. And I think that's where my hope is as a citizen of this country and a defender of this country is, yeah, there's a lot of junk going on right now, but look at what they're creating. If you've kept up, just quick, not to drill into a rabbit hole, but if you see that Evergreen College hubbub up there in Washington State, this professor came out against the activities of the social justice activities on their campus and says, I'm a diehard liberal progressive, and you guys are pushing me into being a conservative because of the typically my views are now conservative based on where the left has gone. And I'm just like, wow, this is how you win people with truth and consistency. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, that's exactly right. The end of this article, he sums it up, and I think he just kind of sums up the entire problem that we're seeing. He says, quote, "The only thing worse than the social transformation is for godly people with godly values to acquiesce to it and become content with it. We as a society tend to take the easy way out. And that is by far, that is so far opposite of the founders that started this American project, if you will. They realized how difficult this was. They put their lives, their fortunes, everything on hold. A lot of these guys lost everything. They lost their families, they lost their fortunes, they lost their homes. They hid out in the woods to try and at least survive, so one more night so they could go back to Philadelphia in a couple of days and debate something. What are we willing to do to protect what we've got? And it's easy to say that, how do we stop this? Easy, we shoot them. Slick, I get it. But that I want to go back to something that you said earlier in the chat, Slick, and that is how we've given up on talking with people. And that's one of the big things with this show, is wanting to create a community around stuff so we can talk. And I've brought this up in the past where I don't mind discussing things with those on the left, because in the end, we're both going to learn something. I'm going to learn more about them and what they see and how they view it, and they're going to see things hopefully from my standpoint, and we're going to work towards that middle gray area where I think the majority of Americans actually live. But they fall into that, okay, well, that's the easy way, that's how I want to do it. And I think that I don't know how many years, I mean, you go back to the 60s, like you said, where you had the flower power hippies that just wanted to say, no, man, we just want to sex, drugs, and rock and roll, man, because it's easy, bro. That's not how this is supposed to work. It's hard. I mean, Thomas Paine said that these are the times that try men's souls. He wasn't speaking for his day. He was talking about us today. He was looking ahead to the future and saying, look, if you squander any of this hard work that we're doing right here, right now, trust me, it's going to be devastating. And the last thing we want to do is start giving up. We have gotten... He touches on it in the article. I'll have to find a link to it and link it out on Twitter or something. But it's because it really is a good read. It really is, and thank you for bringing it up, because it really opened my eyes to a couple of things. And I think we may have to go into a little more detail. And sometimes it's easier to write things than it is to say them, because it's you can kind of collect your thoughts a little better. But if we just sit at home on our couch and expect somebody else to do it, and if we all have that same mentality, nothing is ever going to get done. They are going to continue to stay, to hold things hostage, if you will, being the courts and Congress, and all of our elected officials are going to be doing the same thing. It's we saw it over the weekend with news, how they create the story. They create it wherever they are. And we saw CNN creating the fake news, hashtag fake news, where they're going and collecting people and putting them in front of the camera and staging them so that, 30 yards behind where they're standing, they've got other people that look like it's ground, like they're doing ground control. And we allow it. We can't do this anymore. It's not getting us anywhere. We've got to start holding people accountable. And thankfully, I'm really hopeful, based off of of this article that I read, that about how the Supreme Court is expediting the Trump's travel ban, EO, that hopefully people's eyes are starting to open up to this crap. It's stupid. We can't give up. I get so sick and tired of hearing people, oh, well, I'm just going to vote for this guy because, he's got to be better than she will be. Well, but now look where we're at. 9 years ago, look what we got. 12 years ago, look what we got. 16 years ago, 24 years ago, look what we got. I mean, we've got to start coming up with some solutions. And so, we can debate these things all we want. We can, at some point, we have to look at history. And I lost control of the chat room. There it is. Okay. So, here's the thing. We've got to start looking at history and understanding that stuff and applying it to the things that are happening today. It's just like you brought up earlier, where being able to know and understand what the role of Congress is in relation to not only the Supreme Court, but the lower courts. I mean, if you want it, go read the opening statement, the opening clause to Article 3. Go read it, and you will understand that those powers rest with Congress. Congress can immediately shut down all these lower courts grabbings and put an end to it. And we can rein back that power. And what we really got to do is start focusing on centralizing it in the states and at even lower local levels. But we've really got to start looking at history, putting it over what we're seeing today, and coming up with some solutions. Because all this bickering that goes on Facebook and Twitter and everywhere else is getting old and tiring. And like you said, the college professor in Washington State, who is basically finding out that he's a conservative. I mean, it's going to take him a little longer, but as long as we're consistent in arguing, we can't just give up and say, well, the court said it, so that's the way it is. Yeah, this stuff just infuriates me. I get so sick of it. So let's start coming up with some ideas on how we can fix this. What can we do? I mean, give me the first thing off the top of your head what we can do, John, to start putting some solutions together.
Well, number one is listen to this radio show, especially Profiles in History, and those who founded the Constitution. I mean, man, that is just, I have learned so many neat little things. It's like, wow, that's great. So if you're not educating yourself, you can't spot the counterfeits. There's books out there, many by Bill O'Reilly. There was one I was reading from the American Patriots, kind of the background of it's very high level, so you don't have to be a history geek. You can, talks about the foundation of the Constitution and why we even have one to begin with. So if you're not putting any time and effort into it, you can't get anything back. It's like being physically fit and ready. If you're not going out there and at least walking every morning, and doing a few pull-ups or push-ups, we can read a book and we can talk about it, but if you're not doing it, you're not going to gain the benefit. And that's the first thing to do is arm yourself. Put some knowledge in your noggin. The second thing is connect with others. We've got a great community here. Looking out for your congressman, I had an opportunity to go to. Okay, I had kind of going into enemy territory, but I got to meet a Democrat congressman out in Pasadena, here in California, and I listened to this guy, and he's rattling off how the state's in trouble. He's a state congressman. Let me clarify that, not a U.S. Congress. But I was listening to this guy, and like, my gosh, he's a very fiscally conservative guy. When talk about the impact how Pasadena is losing business because of our crazy taxation rates here in California. So, I like this guy. Wow. So I got to get his business card and just kind of track him online a little bit. And how many people in the audience can name their U.S. representative in Congress? Who's their senator? Who's their state congressional congressperson? Do you know that stuff? It's basic things. Familiarize yourself. And it's not that hard, Daniel. And it's kind of fun once you start digging into it.
It really is.
Who are you being represented by?
Listen, somebody out there made it so dummy-proof. You can literally download an app on your phone of the entire list of congressmen, and it even gives you all branches, all the way across, and you can hit a button in the app, and it will dial the number for you for anybody. And you can call them and talk. I used to have it on mine, but I think I got rid of it, or it was on an old phone or something. But don't feel intimidated to call these people. They work for you. You don't work for them. I mean, it's their job to answer your questions. It's their job to take the legislation and say, and you can call them up and say, look, Mr. Moran, I don't understand why you haven't been pressing the issue on fixing the VA. I mean, you claim that the military is a #1 priority for you. I mean, I'm talking about the guy in Kansas. You claim that the VA is a top issue. You claim this. What the hell are you doing? I haven't seen or heard anything from you. Why am I seeing other congressmen and senators from other states putting together legislation to help? I didn't see your name on it. Explain. Don't just sit back and wait for them to call you. They're never going to call you. The only time they want to call you is when they want to robocall you and say, hey, will you vote for me? Call them. If they know you by name, then you're doing something right. If they get scared every time they see your name and number pop up on the caller ID, you're doing something right. Sorry, I didn't mean to steal that one from you, but go ahead, John. What else can we do?
Well, I'll tell you what, that's teach your kids.
Yes.
I mean, for those of you who are faithful and believe in Christ or go to church, what does the Old Testament talk about most of the time to the Israelis? Teach your children what God has done for you. Pass that along. Look what happened to Israel in the ancient times when they didn't do that. They got into all kinds of chaos and even got expelled at one point. So, if God didn't spare them, is he going to spare us? So this pass this on to your children. Change happens each generation, as it's even in your introductory music. Where Reagan says we're just one generation away from tyranny. And I think if we don't pass that on and we don't teach our children the value of our freedoms and liberties, they're just simply not going to appreciate it. Didn't cost them anything. They're not going to value it until it's too late.
Okay, let me touch on a couple of things that have been said over on the chat room.
Synagogue always counts.
Yes, the synagogue does count. And if I remember, we went to an interfaith discussion between Mormons and a local Jewish congregation. Fascinating discussion. And we actually drew a lot of parallels between those of the LDS faith and those of the Jewish faith. And number one at the top of the list was family. And being a member of the LDS church, one of the things we do is we have family councils. We also do family home evening. We do Oh, we do. We sit down as the father figure in the home. We'll sit down with our children one on one. We call them a priesthood, a personal priesthood interview or something like that, without getting extremely technical. But we sit down. We sit down with each member of the family, and we discuss. I sit down with my wife and I talk about issues. I mean, we kind of blanket it during our date night, but. Or just whenever, when she has an issue, and me being that, having that role in the house, in the household, it's my job to make sure that all of her spiritual and physical and emotional needs are being met. And I can't leave that up to somebody else. That's my job. That's my role. And so as you see and you're taught things in your church or in your congregation or in your synagogue, and that's one of the things that I took away from that interfaith discussion, was how tight the Jewish families are. I mean, every Friday night, the father sits down with every child, and they go over things. He teaches them. They go over scripture. They go over other life lessons. It was fascinating, and to be able to take that from their culture and see that, well, ours over here isn't too different. Well, and I can learn from that. So I'm going to take some of that and see how it works over here. And it helped leaps and bounds in our house. So, look, I want to challenge people that it doesn't matter what faith you are. All right, you could even be a Wiccan, and there's a Wiccan lady out there, Becky Noble. Many of you may know her. She's not very active on Twitter. She used to be at Patriot Witch, but she's over with the Politichicks now. She writes over there. Fascinating, just awesome lady. I don't know if she's still podcasting or not. I haven't seen very much out of her. I know she's doing some writing over there, but she's a Wiccan. She's a witch, and proud of it. But she's conservative, and her husband is a Christian, and they still do faithful things. It's fascinating. So you've got to be able to set things aside and grow and learn and move forward and progress in life. And it doesn't make you a progressive by any means at all. It just means that you're forwarding the cause of your family. You're forwarding the cause of your community. You're moving forward in life instead of just letting somebody else take control. So yes, Jessica, in the chat, does the synagogue count? Yes. Let me see. I thought there was another one in there that I wanted to touch on. Oh, they were talking about the media. Sorry, I'm just trying to catch up, John. But talking about the media, look, we're seeing these things happen where somebody is out there with their cell phone and recording video, posts it on Twitter, and CNN is still around. How is CNN still around after all of that? Shut those shows off. If you watch or you listen to this show or the podcast or whatever, share it. Like it, comment, share it with your friends, with your family. Open that dialogue with them. Even if they don't agree, it's okay. I got a liberal guy out there that follows me, and he does not like very many things that I say, but there are some things we agree with, that we agree on. And I really hope he's listening now or listens to the podcast, because I want to give him props again. He's a fantastic photographer. But look, you find those people whose opinions are different than yours. Talk with them. If you see stuff in the media, call them out. Don't stand for it. Shut them off. We're seeing the implosion at Fox News. Why? Because things aren't as good as people thought they were. I mean, you can say you're doing this or you're doing that, but in the end, we all eventually find out the real truth. So shut off the lamestream media and turn on these new shows. And these are the people like us here with this show and in this community of the show, that we live this stuff daily, and we talk about it, and we share what's happening in our lives, and that's the stuff that makes the show. I mean, we just over the weekend we went to the bookstore and found out that, you know, Christian bookstores make you feel pretty inadequate, but we still keep going. So, John, I agree 100% with 100% of the stuff that you said tonight. I think that we've got a lot of work ahead of us, and I think that it all starts within the home. And from there, it starts in church, it starts in the home, it starts within our communities, and from there, it can blossom into something beautiful again. I don't know if you've got anything else to say, but, you know, the mic is yours. Go ahead.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you, brother. It is, you know, I always think to my favorite verse in the Bible is, so iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. And, you know, if we don't talk about these things, debate these things, and go and do just a little bit of homework, doesn't take much, you know, we get guilty of rusting ourselves into non-existence. So I appreciate this community. And Daniel, it's always a great show, and it's always a pleasure to be on with you. I look forward to coming on again sometime. Well,
we will have you on. Again, let the audience know where they can find you. How can they find you on Twitter?
Sure. I'm Army on Twitterverse. I am at Army John. Come find me, add me. Let's go have some great conversations.
Awesome. Okay, well, we will definitely have you on in the future. So, John, I know you're paying attention over on the YouTube side. I'm going to let you take control of that, and while you're listening to Profiles in History. Again, super thankful that you tuned in, or that you joined us on the show. This was great conversation. I think we've got some good stuff that we need to continue on other mediums, and we may even just have to come back to it in a week or two and talk about it some more. So thankful that you're willing to do that, and thanks so much for coming on tonight. I really appreciate it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's time. Your favorite time and mine. Profiles in History. During the Battle of Yorktown, he stood and watched his home get pounded with artillery because, well, it was believed that British General Cornwallis was headquartered there. But that's not exactly how the entire thing went down. Thomas Nelson Jr. was born in Yorktown, Virginia on December 26, 1738. He was the oldest son of successful merchant and landholder William Nelson. He was called Junior because his uncle Thomas also lived in Yorktown. At the age of 14, Nelson was sent to Britain for a proper English education. He studied for 8 years and graduated from Cambridge University in 1761. He returned to Virginia and married Lucy Grimes on July 29, 1762. And together, they would have 11 children. It looked as if life was beginning to get comfortable for him, as his father gave him a plantation and a townhome in Yorktown. He had it all: money, land, slaves, connections. Enough so that he became a member of the House of Burgesses of Virginia in just a short few years. Surprising to some were his patriotic views, considering the amount of time he had spent in England. But he later explained his beliefs in a letter to a friend, saying that he thought there was no greater absurdity than Americans having, quote, affection for a people who are carrying on the most savage war against us. Royal Governor Lord Dunmore in 1774 had learned that Virginia's Burgesses were allying themselves with Bostonians against the crown. So he dissolved the legislature. However, this didn't stop Nelson and his fellow rabble-rousers. They simply collected their papers, quill pens, and walking sticks and moved to Williamsburg's Raleigh Tavern. While there, they passed more resolutions, including one that called on the other colonies to send delegates to a new Continental Congress. Later that year, on November 7th, Nelson and a few compatriots further distinguished themselves by staging what is referred to today as the Yorktown Tea Party of 1774. They boarded the British ship Virginia, which had carried tea, and dumped its tea into the York River. As part of the new Virginia Provincial Congress in Williamsburg from 1774 to 75, Nelson was named colonel and put in command of one of the 3 new regiments being formed, but would resign the next month when he was named as a delegate to the 1775 Continental Congress. In the spring of 76, Nelson introduced a resolution, Edmund Pendleton, drafted to the Virginia's Provincial Congress. The resolution called for permission for Virginia's delegates to the Continental Congress to declare independence from Britain. They adopted his resolution, and he brought it to Philadelphia. Fellow delegate Richard Henry Lee abridged the resolution and introduced it to Congress on June 7th. The vote, however, would get delayed until July. Thomas did vote in favor for independence and later signed the Declaration of Independence on August 2nd with the other delegates. In 1777, Nelson experienced a somewhat severe headache that caused a bit of memory loss. Add in having suffered from chronic asthma, and it's easy to see why he would take a leave of absence from Congress to return home. Upon returning, Virginia Governor Henry made Nelson Brigadier General and Commander-in-Chief of the state's militia. Thomas was a dedicated leader, often using his own funds and supplies to support the war effort. In 1778, he responded to a general plea from Congress by assembling a troop of light cavalry and marching to Philadelphia to fight off the British. But upon arriving, they discovered they weren't needed. The British had already pulled back to New York. Nelson and his boys marched home, but things were far from over for General Nelson. He was an excellent fundraiser for the militia and often gave his own word and collateral, promising to make good on debts if the state could not. I mean, seriously, we know how good the government is about paying back their debts, right? He even played an instrumental role in securing Virginia's portion of the funds needed to help the Continental Treasury pay the French fleet. Nobody wanted to loan the unproven government the money, but people did agree to loan the money to Nelson. He turned over the money in return for securities that ended up being worthless. Lord Cornwallis and Arnold attacked Virginia in 81, leading then-Governor Thomas Jefferson to resign to a person with more military experience that could lead the state during the emergency. Nelson was elected governor and made commander-in-chief of the state's military. Now it was time for him to put his military chops to the test, most famously at the Siege of Yorktown. Now, there's a popular story about his conduct during the siege of his hometown as he watched the American artillery pound Yorktown. As it goes, the British weren't getting any rest, except for one untouched house. Nelson asked why it wasn't being fired upon, and the soldiers reportedly answered that it was his home and they wanted to show respect for their governor and commander. Family tradition says Nelson then told the troops to have at 'em, supposedly even offering the gunners 5 guineas for every hit. He then stood there watching as projectiles rained down on his home, driving British officers away. Nelson's home wasn't his only asset damaged in the Revolution. War wreaked havoc on his fortunes as well. His economic standing and mercantile business were headed downhill even before he started loaning money to the government, as he was not the world's best bookkeeper. And when the notes came due on the loans he had secured for the nation, he found ways to pay up, often selling land and slaves. And in fact, in his will, he instructed that parts of his land be sold to pay off any leftover debts. Nelson's asthma continued to plague him for the remainder of his life, and although he was elected a delegate to the Constitutional Convention in 87, he declined serving. Instead, he moved to a small estate called Awfully Hoo in Hanover County, where he passed away at the age of 50 on January 4th, 1789. His house in Yorktown was repaired and still stands today. The holes the cannonballs made in its walls in the last major battle of the Revolutionary War are still visible. And that is this week's Profiles in History. And unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this week. I know, listen, stay tuned because I'm trying to put them out every day. Sometimes I miss one. I get it. But if you haven't paid attention, putting out things called the morning mashup or midday mashup, whatever it is, because of what time of the day it is. So I really, really encourage you to go out and listen to them, share them with your friends. It's news you can use in 5 minutes or less. That's it. Sometimes there's a silly story, but you will always get a hard-hitting report on something that's going on. So, like I said, that's all we've got for this week. God willing, the Stafford Voice will be back next week. Follow me on Twitter or Gab at Stafford Voice. Look me up on Facebook, Instagram, wherever you're at, by looking for the Stafford Voice. Email your questions or comments or concerns to the Stafford Voice at gmail.com. Thank you so much for your time. And until next week, thanks and God bless. All right, are we still live? Are we still there? Hello? Hello? Are we still there? I think we are. Let's see. Good thing Daniel didn't have video of me on the show. Y'all see me? Oh, wow. John says he was wearing underwear. Oh. Wow. Well, I'm glad we didn't have video of that, John. Back to you, Slick. Okay. Slick says Tina listens to him. And John says knowing is half the battle. Well, thank you. It was super, super fun to have John on. I really enjoyed this topic. Oh, Refill, thanks. I appreciate that. He says it was the best show done all month. I'm gonna have to give that one to. I'm gonna have to give that one over to John. He's the one that made this one fully possible, fully funded by you guys as well. I see we've got some other people popping up. Who is Orson? Did I miss somebody in the chat? Email inbound about those mashups headed your way. I want them for the stage. Oh, well, yeah. Thumbs up from Jessica. Oh, Jessica, that's our daughter-in-law. She was watching. Oh boy, I hope I didn't say anything to incriminate myself. I do have a Patreon account. It's like Patreon, it's Stafford Voice or something. Just go, if you're interested, you can go over to the Patreon and search for the Stafford Voice. It's there. Let's see. KLRN Radio says they've been quietly lurking. Oh, Mork calling Orson Nanu Nanu. Oh. Wow, did I just give my age away or just my nerdism from back in the day when... Oh, thanks, babe. Thanks. Appreciate that.
You're a young guy.
So I got that going for me.
You're a young guy.
I'm not young. I'm going to be a grandpa.
You're younger than...
I'm going to be an oppa. Oh. Well, hi, Daniel. Saying lurking. So Daniel and Jessica, our son and daughter, were watching. Hopefully...
Daniel, I said hi.
Mom says hi, Daniel. Does anyone live near the Chicago area? No, we're in the Kansas City area. I don't think he was asking us. Oh. Anyway, look, I'm young. I'm hip. I'm with it. Oh. Be careful, I might throw my hip out. Young 16-year-old Kira Gardner still... Oh, that's the one Yeah. We got to keep up on those refill. Refill, you're our OIC for our missing people. You need to put together a missing persons report weekly. Did mom provide cookies for son and father? No, actually, we had a s'mores pie. It was really good.
Actually, if Jessica...
Oatmeal cranberry crack cookies?
Yeah.
Oh!
So Daniel...
I will show you pictures of the crack cookies. Yes, my shirt says I'm a genius, and you get it? Because it's germanium and nickel and uranium, sulfur. Yep. Holy smokes, s'mores pie? Yes, it was fantastic. It had chocolate drizzled on top of some marshmallow type stuff on top of...
Like a meringue. It was like...
It was marshmallow. There was no meringue about it. It was marshmallow.
I'm right.
Let me live my dream.
I should...
Let me live in the moment. It was... There was marshmallow on it. Then there was this chocolate fluff stuff. And then there was like a graham cracker crust. Oh. Oh, John says, speaking chemistry elements like a true sapper. Yeah, well, I mean, hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon, nitrogen. Then there's like neon in there somewhere. I forget. That's as far as I made it through the periodic table of elements. Just gained 5 pounds listening to that description. Well, you know what? I had a good workout. I did some squats. And then I've been trying to get better at doing pull-ups. Yeah, I'm really bad at them. Oh, anyway. Do. Where? Boink, boink, boink. Only the ones that explode. There's a lot of elements that explode. Okay. Look, we've got to shut things... What do you want? You want to give me the cat. The cat... It's not hug your cat. It's not let your cat have a radio show day. You're not even saying anything now. Oh. Why are you skipping my... I'm not skipping... Jessica, I'm not skipping your comments. I'm reading them. I mean, you guys took like half of my... what are they called? Twizzlers things?
I gave them.
I had a black and white cookie before the show.
What's a black and white?
What's a black and white cookie? Oh, Jessica. Oh, sorry. I'm mixing up Jessica's now. Jessica wants her share of the pie. That's fine. I shouldn't have any more.
There's plenty more.
Don't say that! The producer is cameo in the show. Host Kitty says meow. Hilarious how the cat popped into the chat. Daniel, you forgot to capitalize the D of your name, silly. Oh, miss you guys. We need to do something with them. Hurry up and have that grandbaby, would ya?
No, she's gotta wait.
I know, but the time needs to like hurry up.
Okay.
I'm not getting younger. Did the cat get the Twizzlers? No.
No, she won't get Twizzlers.
The kids took half the Twizzlers.
I gave...
Daniel says he wants some crack cookies. We're working on them.
I'm gonna try and get...
Don't you watch Seinfeld? Okay. We don't talk about black and white cookies or Seinfeld in front of the cat. Yes, I want some crack cookies too. Look. I want some crack cookies. Yes, refill. Daniel is my son. He's the third. His wife is Jessica, aka Jessica Lewis. I mean, that's not the last name. It's She's still using an old login, I guess. Apparently you have to change your license, but they don't make sure you change all your social statuses. Whatever, I'm giving you a hard time, Jess. Anyway, so yeah, Jessica with a Y in the chat room is our daughter. So apparently they're sharing the same account and trying to give me a hard time. Will there be a Daniel 4.0? Probably not. He's not that interested in passing that on, which is fine. It's okay. I like the name. I like the name they got picked out. His name's Gavin. I've already given him the nickname of Gavinator. Yes, Gavin Edward Stafford. So there's some meaning behind the Edward, which is really cool. It's a family name on Jess's side. Anyway, I was needing to get off because I got stuff to do. No, I'm lazy and not logged in my account. Well, I am, but not really. No, the last name's not Stafford Voice. But look, it's gonna be. I'm not gonna spoil it. We're gonna live in the moment with that one, but we will share as much as we can with you guys, because you guys are more than friends. You guys are family. You guys know that by now. I know he's just being silly. That's what refill's good for. That and filing putting together the missing persons report. Expect that on my desk by Monday morning next week there, refill. Yeah, we got that going for us. Yeah. Okay. What? Yeah. Where did that come from?
I don't know.
What do you want me to shorten your name to, Rocks? Whatever. When the vlog's coming back, yes, I know, we're working on it. Probably not this weekend. We're working on it. But, yes, we're working on it. Okay, so let's wrap this up. Thanks, everybody, for watching or listening or however it is that you participated tonight. I really, really appreciate it. You guys are awesome. You guys are as much a part of this show as I am, and the Mrs. Voice that sits over there so super quietly and blowing her nose and raining the cat's meows, keeping them quiet. So super, super thankful that you guys tuned in, however which way it was. You guys are awesome. You guys are a part of a family and a community here. Speaking of which, if you want to be a part of, this community that we're trying to build outside of this to keep things going, let me know. You can hit me up in a private message, whether it's Facebook or Twitter. Send me your email address and I will send you an invite. We're starting to get some stuff going over there. I'm kind of liking where it's going so far. Anyway, we are out. Till next time, thanks, and God bless.